Hey there, this is Seth Schaefer from Team Just Cause Robotics, and in today's video, I want to talk about the Witch Doctor Minotaur fight in the finals, and how I feel that the referees really screwed up the results. Now, this setup's a little differently than how I normally do things, but I figured it was warranted to pull out all the stops for this video, because the last time I made a video about a surprising thing that happened in Battlebots, it got over 25,000 views and became the most viewed video on my channel almost overnight. Before I get into the actual written rules, let me know in the comments, who do you think should have won this judge's decision? Do you think it should have gone to the judges at all? Or do you think that one of the bots should have been counted out? From this point onwards, there are massive spoilers ahead, so you've been warned. If you haven't seen the fight, go watch it now. I'm going to start off by addressing the tournament rules exactly word for word as written, then I'll talk about the way that they should have been applied to the fight, and I'll try to be as objective as possible. When I say my opinions, I will state very clearly that it is my opinions, and not just my attempts to interpret the rules in an objective fashion. Disclaimer, I have worked on both Bloodsport and Retrograde in the 2021 season of Battlebots, but these opinions are my own. Team Just Cause Robotics is just me. Team Bots and Stuff Robotics is the team that makes those two robots. My personal opinion is not reflective of anything that anybody else on the Bots and Stuff team feels, okay? Let's just clear that up. They have their own YouTube channel where anything that is team related goes. This is just my own personal platform. Now with that said, let's get into it. Let's start off with the rules about unsticks. If we look at the tournament rules here, and we look at the definition of a stuck robot, this is what it says. Whether a robot is stuck or not depends upon circumstances. A robot, or combination of robots, will be considered to be stuck in the following situations. The robot is jammed or otherwise hung up on a non-movable part of the arena environment, such that it is effectively non-responsive. This includes the surrounding spike strip of the upper deck. Huh, that's very specific and happens to be exactly what happened in this situation. How about that? Now, you'll see I highlighted some stuff down here. Basically all of this stuff is just what won't be considered stuck, but if we look at the stuck robot procedures, we can see what should happen in the case of a robot getting stuck. You can see here it says clearly, if at any time during a match, a robot or multi-bot segment becomes stuck and cannot free itself after 20 seconds, the referees can call a timeout. If a team has determined that their robot or multi-bot segment has become stuck, the robot's team needs to tell the referee that their robot is stuck. Now, we didn't see Andrea tell the referees anything in the fight, but that could easily have been edited out. But what I know for a fact was not edited out was how much time elapsed between Witch Doctor getting stuck and when they paused the fight. And I can guarantee you, I will now show you some footage to prove it, that it was nowhere close to 20 full seconds. Why do I think this is so important? Well, I think that Minotaur could have used the extra time that they had before the unstick to hit Witch Doctor again, which A, could have turned the tide of the fight, and B, would have had a good chance of unsticking Witch Doctor anyway, given that they were able to be pulled out with one guy in a crowbar. I think that the fight could have continued like normal, with Minotaur having somewhat closer to an upper hand in that instance, and that really could have changed the tide of things. But let's watch the footage and you'll see what I mean. Time for you to look at something that you never get to see. Completely uncut, unedited footage from the taping of the show. So this is what everybody in the pits sees as competitors that's projected on our screens. And this is 100% live camera feeds from the arena. And you'll see it's a different camera angle here. And fortunately, for the point that I wanted to look at, you can clearly see the clock. So I'm going to go into full screen mode here. All right, so what I have here in the top right is completely unedited, uncut footage from the live taping. This was streamed from the cameras in the arena straight to the pits where every team could see it. And then here is the TV edit of the footage, and you can see they do a really terrible job of editing in the Autodesk Fusion 360 logo here without bothering to color match when the lights make this part red and all that crap. And in the real life, that is just the Battlebots logo, which they use as a marker to track in planar track of this banner for the sponsors. So you can clearly tell this is edited, at least that much. But I've played back the entire first half of this fight, and it lines up frame for frame with the unedited version. So they did not cut it for time at all. And you can see exactly what the clock shows when Witch Doctor gets stuck.
Trying to find its way out. Daniel Freitas dazed and confused. Can he get out of here? This is a huge opportunity for Witch Doctor. Oh, they crawl off. How about Minotaur's missing a tire? This is ridiculous. Witch Doctor looks like it's caught under the rails. Timeout, Minotaur. Timeout.
So they called that timeout. If we go back, we can see exactly when Witch Doctor gets stuck because the clock is still visible. So, take a look here. The clock is at 1:43. Go frame by frame forward, 1:43, and it changes to 1:42 over the course of a few frames. So, let's say Witch Doctor is stuck at 1:42. Okay. Witch Doctor's stuck. They call the timeout. Daniel Freitas is pissed. And boom. Minute and 32 seconds left in the fight when they restart. So there was only 10 seconds that elapsed before Witch Doctor was given an unstick and they paused the fight. That is contrary to how the rules are written. Completely. Alright, so we're at a position where Witch Doctor is unstuck and the match resumes. From this point on, there are still two different referee calls that could have happened that neither of which happened. Number one, Minotaur could have been counted out. And number two, there's another rule that very rarely comes up, but that is very clearly stated in this rule set, and it wasn't recently added either, but that I can't think of a single time where this rule has actually been enforced. But I will get to that in a minute. So first we can talk about uncontrolled robot movement. If at any point it appears a robot cannot move in a controllable manner during a match, the referee will direct the team to show that the robot can move forward in an approximate straight line and or a specific direction. I can't think of a single time that they've ever actually made a robot go in a specific direction. Also, I feel like it's good that they don't do that, because that would be really stupid in the middle of a fight if they're like, hey, your opponent's here and you're here, I want you to go that way. And you're like, what if I just don't? But anyway, if the referee determines the operator cannot control the robot's movement or direction, the referee can start the count. Now, according to a Facebook post by the Witch Doctor team, the referee on their side and the referee on the other side were not communicating effectively. The referee on Witch Doctor's side was telling the Witch Doctor team that a countout was imminent the whole time, and that was why the Witch Doctor team decided not to engage, which I guess makes sense with the perspective that they were being, lied to essentially by the referee. I'm not saying the referee intended to lie to them, because that referee had no control over what the referee on Minotaur's side was actually going to do regarding a countout. I originally, before seeing that post, was going to say it seemed like they should have engaged because their opponent was still mobile, but I can understand where Mike's decision-making would come from in choosing not to engage until the last possible moment when it was clear a countout could no longer happen in the last 10-20 seconds of the fight. So there are rules here that govern a single incapacitation knockout, which is basically every normal knockout that we see. During a match, a robot has to be able to demonstrate it is responsive. This is confirmed as follows. At any time, and for any reason, a referee can request that the team's operator show the robot or multibot is responsive. We see this happen all the time. After the request, the referee will start a countdown from 20, of which the final 10 counts will be called out loud for the operators to demonstrate that the robot can exhibit controlled translational movement. If the robot or multibot cannot demonstrate that it is responsive before the end of the countdown, it will be declared incapacitated. If one team's robot is incapacitated, then the opponent team will be declared the winner, and the win will be considered a knockout, obviously. So this is pretty straightforward, except for the part where there isn't a very clear definition of controlled translational movement, which I think is the problem with a lot of these fights. We've seen in the fight between Ribot and Hydra, Ribot was counted out when they seemed very mobile, and yet Minotaur here was not counted out, I would argue that Minotaur was probably less mobile than Ribot was in their fight against Hydra, and yet Ribot got counted out and Minotaur did not. In both of these cases, this is where I think this gets to be pretty fishy. In both of these cases, they couldn't engage with their opponent. And it was argued, at least in the Ribot Hydra match, that failure to engage with your opponent is essentially grounds to be counted out. It seems weird to me, though, that if a robot is driving away from you and therefore you can't engage with it, that you should be counted out, because it's the robot driving away from you's fault that you can't engage with them. This could happen with two completely fully working robots with fully functional drivetrains, just one of the robots is faster than the other one. Like, if Hypershock was trying to avoid Tombstone, I feel like they could very easily drive circles around Tombstone for 3 minutes without getting hit. That would be kind of stupid to count out Tombstone then, wouldn't it? Well, there is actually a rule that addresses this that never really comes up, and that is right here. Knockout due to engagement avoidance. If a referee believes that an operator is deliberately avoiding the engagement of their robot with the opponent robot, the referee will notify that operator that their robot must make physical contact with or otherwise engage the opponent robot. If the operator does not attempt to comply, the referee may declare that the operator's team has lost due to a knockout. Now, I know why this is basically never done, because it would be pretty stupid to have two fully functional robots driving around and then all of a sudden on TV you just hear, well, this robot lost because reasons. I feel like it's difficult to explain to a TV audience. However, having been in the driver's booth with Retrograde when we were fighting Huge, we were trying to get a good angle to attack Huge because driving straight into their weapon is very stupid and would kill us, as we found out later in the fight. When Aaron was doing his best to avoid engaging with Huge, the referee was hounding us constantly that we had to engage. He didn't specify that he was going to start counting us out, but he did say that we need to engage over and over and over again, which was very frustrating at the time. And I've heard from some other teams that the same sort of thing happened to them. And that was for us within the first like 20, maybe 30 seconds of the fight too. It wasn't like with this where there was 90 seconds of Witch Doctor avoiding engagement. So it just seems very strange to me that Witch Doctor was not being threatened with being forced to engage, while it was clear that Minotaur wasn't going to be counted out. But I guess the real issue is simply the communication between the referees was so bad that it wasn't clear at any time that Minotaur wasn't going to get counted out. So I honestly can't say with an objective sense how we should feel about this as a community, but I do think that obviously at the end of the day, the referees made this a much worse fight than it could have been in multiple ways by making that early unstick happen, and also by being extremely confusing with their communication to the two teams. So I think that created an undue amount of stress on the Minotaur team especially, and then also caused everybody to be incredibly upset with the Witch Doctor team when they were awarded the win for a fight that the crowd clearly felt that they should have lost, when it really wasn't their fault that their referee kept telling them that Minotaur was going to get counted out, and the other referee just didn't count Minotaur out the whole time. So, with that said, next let's move on to the judging, and whether I feel that the judge's decision was fair or not. Before I get into the judging criteria and the rules, I want to address a couple things. First off, the judging criterion changed a lot between 2020 and 2021. They added something called the judging matrix. On the whole, this season, I think that the judging was a lot better than in season 5. I do think there were still some calls that went a different way than what I would expect based on my interpretation of the rules, but judges' decisions are inherently subjective to an extent. There is a little bit of conflicting language in the judging criterion, but it was much worse in season 5 than it was in season 6, in my opinion. I think that the rules are a lot clearer as to how judging should be done for fights in Season 6. Also, I did my research. I happen to have the actual scorecards for the fight. I will be showing those on screen now. So I will talk through how I would have judged the fight. Spoiler alert, I feel this fight was actually judged fairly according to the rules. The only thing that I find a little weird is the flipped control score on Lisa's card. But I could see how damage could be arrived at as either 3-2 or 4-1 in this case. And I think that the judges were spot on with their aggression scores across the board. So with that said, let's get into the breakdown of how the actual judging matrix is written and how those scores could be arrived at. All right. In true YouTuber fashion, I managed to record 15 minutes of this and then realized that I had not hit the record button in OBS. I accidentally clicked start streaming instead. So I'm going to try and speed through this a bit faster this time and be a bit clearer and more concise. This is the official judges guide from 2021. Changes from 2020 are shown in blue. There's a lot of them. Don't worry about it. Damage is 5 points, aggression is 3 points, and control is 3 points. 2 judges have to vote for a robot for that robot to win. If all 3 judges vote for the same robot, that's unanimous. If only 2, then it's split. That's pretty straightforward in how it works. First, let's talk about damage. Now we saw on the judges' scorecards, Lisa went 4-1, whereas the other 2 judges went 3-2. Personally, I feel as though 3-2 is a little bit of a better fit here. Basically, we're talking about reducing functionality and effectiveness of various aspects of the bot. We've got the drive, we've got the defensibility, and we've got the weapon. So we can see here is a breakdown of how this could be scored with the judges' matrix. So, in my opinion, based on these definitions given down here, we can see that the drive was reduced in functionality and in effectiveness. So it was not just it was reduced completely in functionality on Minotaur, not only in effectiveness. So we had eliminating the functionality of the drive, defensibility, or weapon on Minotaur. Witch Doctor managed to accomplish that. That is significant damage. Massive damage would be eliminating the functionality of 2 systems on the bot. That did not happen. And you could also see that reducing the effectiveness of 2 or more systems is also significant damage. In this case, I would say that the effectiveness of Witch Doctor's drive was reduced because we heard the announcers call out that they lost a drive chain early on. One or both of Witch Doctor's back wheels was not powered at the end of the fight, but both bots had functional weapons and Minotaur only had 1 wheel. So I would say that the best fit for this would probably be under, you know, Witch Doctor dealt significant damage and received moderate damage. I could, however, see it being labeled such that Witch Doctor received only minimal damage. The reason that I would lean towards moderate is because Witch Doctor also lost a front wedge, so that I could say is reducing the defensibility effectiveness in addition to the drive effectiveness. So that would be, you know, reducing the effectiveness of the drive, defensibility, or weapon. It kind of was 2 of them, but you also had complete functionality loss on the drive of Minotaur. So yeah, 3-2, 4-1, I could see it either way. You can also see here, if one bot takes a substantial amount of damage to the function of critical systems of the opposing bot, or does a substantial amount of damage to the functional critical systems of the opposing bot, but also takes some damage that reduces the effectiveness of its own critical systems, then that would be 4-1. So this is probably where Lisa was coming from with her 4-1 decision for damage towards Witch Doctor. Moving on, we have aggression. So aggression across the board, all 3 judges voted that 2 aggression points go to Minotaur and 1 go to Witch Doctor. That seems pretty straightforward to me. Witch Doctor was totally in this fight the first half of the fight, and then they hung back for the second half of the fight, whereas Minotaur was only in the fight for the first half of the fight. And furthermore, Minotaur was trying to get to Witch Doctor the entire time and trying to use their weapon the entire time, but Witch Doctor was intentionally avoiding contact for the entire second half of the fight. So if a bot is actively avoiding contact with the opponent, like Witch Doctor did, that is minimal aggression. If a bot is showing frequent demonstrations of boldness and or intent by utilizing its active weapon, that is significant aggression. And we can see here in examples of a 2-to-1 score, if a bot has a functional weapon but never uses it, or uses it with little effect, that bot should not receive more than 2 points. So yeah, I would say it couldn't be 3-0 for Minotaur because they did not get as much effectiveness from their weapon attacks as they could have, since Witch Doctor still had a functioning drive and functioning weapon. So I would say still 2 points to Minotaur. Also, you can see the matrix up here, like if there is significant aggression from Minotaur but moderate from Witch Doctor, as we saw the first half of the fight, they were pretty even, then it's 2-to-1. So I'm willing to say 2-to-1 for Minotaur here, and moving on. Now we get to control. So for control, this is basically how the bot dictates when it attacks its opponent, how it avoids putting itself into the path of another bot, and avoids the hazards. So you can see this one gets a little bit convoluted because there's a lot of things that affect control, but all three of these, minimal, moderate, and significant, in some way apply to Witch Doctor. They hit a guardrail, and they also occasionally use their weapon to attack their opponent, and they spent a lot of time avoiding their opponent attacks, but they did not generally avoid the arena hazards. They got stuck in one. And they also, for the most part, moved decisively and effectively, and were able to consistently attack and avoid hits. So yeah, I could see how maybe Lisa would have put control towards Minotaur because minimal is, like, by definition hitting the guardrails of the arena. But here again, 2-to-1 score, neither bot's consistently able to manage its interactions, but the bot that appears to have more influence for a large portion of the fight should receive the 2 control points. This, I think, pretty clearly states that Witch Doctor deserves to get the lead here, because they definitely had the influence over the second half of the fight, much more so than Minotaur did. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Here's also, how does a bot getting stuck to the arena reflect on control? Bots can become stuck to the hazards. If a bot becomes stuck due to its own action, it was probably due to poor control. If the bot subsequently frees itself, the control factor would depend upon what actions it used to get unstuck, but that didn't happen. And if the bot gets stuck due to the actions of its opponent, that could demonstrate superior control by the opponent. I would argue here that because Minotaur was only on one wheel for this, they didn't necessarily direct Witch Doctor to get stuck. But yeah, again, I could kind of see either way, but I don't think that it really changes the outcome of the fight. Alright, I think I've said everything I have to say about this fight at this point. Kind of over it now. To be honest, this season as a whole has had a lot of controversial decisions. I know that some people were also upset about the Tantrum Hydra fight. If you'd like for me to go over that in a future video, again, let me know in the comments. And of course, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the bell icon if you want to see that video or any of my other future videos. And I hope to stop talking about Battlebots for my next video and actually finally put out my Norwalk Havoc March recap for Division version 3, my 3-pound beetleweight bot that is inspired by Deep 6. So stay tuned for that video in the coming week or two. And I'll also be competing with Division again in the April 23rd Norwalk Havoc competition if I can get my parts together in time. So yeah. Thanks for watching.